without further ado, let us explore the next chapter, the 40th chapter, called In the Womb of the Mother. June 2007. Less than 200 miles north of Rishikesh, high in the Himalayas where India meets China, lies a sacred area known as Char Dham, the 4 sacred abodes. There, each of 4 holy pilgrimage sites is home to a sacred temple at the source of a sacred river. 3 of these rivers join at Devprayag, the divine confluence, and it's here that the river Ganga is born. From that point, it flows 1,500 miles out to sea. Even though she is formed by the merging of 3 rivers, one of these, the Bhagirati River, is worshipped as the Ganga, as the source of the Bhagirati, the Ganga. I think I put emphasis on the wrong words in that sentence. I'll just do that sentence again. Even though she is formed by the merging of 3 rivers, one of these, the Bhagirati River, is worshipped as the Ganga, and the source of the Bhagirati Ganga is the Gaumukh Glacier. This is the place where, according to legend, the goddess Ganga came down from heaven in the form of water and, by grace, stayed on to uplift and free the hearts, minds, and lives of those who came to her. Ever since I had first stood on the banks of the Ganga, I had yearned to bathe in the waters of her source, the Gaumukh Glacier, the sacred womb of the Divine Mother, and the womb through which she came. The mere mention of Gaumukh caused my cells to rearrange the way iron filings act in the presence of a magnet. Gaumukh was due north for every molecule in my body. It called to my heart. 11 miles from Gaumukh Glacier is Gangotri Temple, situated at 10,000 feet. Originally, the temple was much closer to the glacier, perhaps at its perimeter. But global warming has caused the glacier's tragic erosion, and it recedes by a depressing number of meters per year, farther from the temple erected in its honor. One must now trek 11 miles through high-altitude forest to reach the glacier beyond the town of Gangotri. The town lies 150 miles north of Rishikesh, but due to the narrow, winding, frequently jammed mountainous roads one must travel to reach it, the journey takes an entire day. After I arrived at the ashram, Pujya Swamiji, my guru, traveled there twice to attend events and invited me to join him, but I declined. I couldn't bear being close to the mother's womb, the glacier so near the temple, but unable to make the pilgrimage due to time constraints. So I waited till I could have it all, see the temple and immerse myself in the source of the mother. Pujya Swamiji's birthday is on the 3rd of June, during the hottest time of the year in India. The Indian summer, quote-unquote, is considered to be May and June. With school and government holidays and a tenfold increase in Indian visitors to Rishikesh. In May 1997, my first summer there, I sent my parents a David Letterman type top 10 list titled, "You Know It's Hot When." The list included, at 4 a.m., when you walk out of a cold shower, you need another cold shower. Your toothpaste melts in its tube and pours like water onto your toothbrush. The candle you light for morning prayers and then extinguish before leaving your room does a full backbend during the day, so that by evening, both the base and the wick are stuck to the fabric of your shrine. During my first experience of Indian summer, all I could do was laugh. Could it really be this hot? I was sweating in places I didn't know could perspire. Sweaty shins? But the Indians seemed not to mind enough to keep from flocking to Rishikesh for the holidays. Swamiji does not permit pomp and show for his birthday, except for the epic celebrations we threw him, surprises up to the last minute. For his 50th and 60th birthdays, he prefers he treat his birthday like any other day. It is foolish, he teaches, as many of the great saints do, to celebrate the natural process of age and decay of a vehicle. The body, he says, as much as we revel in its beauty, as much as its voice carries us to heaven, as much as a smile and the love pouring forth from its eyes wipe clean our slate of self-hatred, worthlessness, and insecurity, is just form. In May 2007, a decade after I compiled my top 10 list, Pujya Swamiji agreed that I could plan a yatra, a sacred pilgrimage for his 55th birthday. We had been to Badrinath and Kedarnath in the previous few years. We had trekked the wooded dirt path to Ganga, and from there to the Valley of Flowers and Hemkund Sahib. We had been to Mount Kailash and Lake Mansarovar 3 times, but we had never been to Gaumukh. "Can we go to Gangotri?" I asked, nearly breathless with excitement. "Sure," he said. "And," I said, then paused. What if he said no? Would I burst into tears? Would I be able to see the perfection in that too? Probably not. I was attached to getting out to the source of the mother. "Can we trek out to Gaumukh?" The moment passed gently, and he said, "Sure." So, on the 30th of May, 2007, a fleet of cars departed Paramarth Niketan for Uttarkashi, the halfway point between Rishikesh and Gangotri. Uttarkashi lies geographically more than 100 miles from Rishikesh and only 35 miles from Gangotri. But the upper Ganga basin, the pristine, fragile, sacred ecozone between Uttarkashi and Gangotri, is so mountainous that the drive takes as long as the one from Rishikesh to Uttarkashi. We reached Uttarkashi by late afternoon. Pujya Swamiji had organized a special arti there on the banks of the Bhagirathi. In addition to Paramarth's special, world-famous arti, this sacred ritual, the evening happy hour, he had begun artis... Wait, how does this sentence go? In addition to Paramarth's world-famous arti, this sacred ritual, the evening happy hour, he has begun artis in more than a dozen cities along the banks of Ganga, including Gangotri, Uttarkashi, Rudraprayag, Jwalapur, Kanpur, Allahabad, and Varanasi. My mind was focused on only one thing: getting to Gaumukh. The arti was beautiful, extraordinarily so. As the priests and residents of this sacred town joined together in waving oil lamps, a ritual usually performed only in temples. Ganga is our temple, Swamiji always says, a 1,500-mile flowing temple. That evening, post-arti, local leaders came to meet with him to request that he adopt the local Gurukul, a Sanskrit residential school that had been horribly damaged in the earthquake a decade earlier and had never been rebuilt. The roof was collapsing, and most of the premises were unstable. It was only the devotion and tenacity of those in charge that kept it open. But now they were out of funds. If they did not secure help, the Vedashala, the home of the Vedas, would have to be shut down. Of course we'll adopt it, Swamiji told them. We left early the next morning for Gangotri. Hairpin turn after hairpin turn up the Himalayas. I'm convinced that only a strong belief in reincarnation permits people to drive on these roads. Ganga rushes through the steep valley below. Ganga rushes through the steep valley below, while cars and buses in both directions vie for the narrow roadway perched between steep mountainsides to one side and a sheer drop to the other. Because the Himalayas are young, what locals call kacha, not really firm, they are prone to landslides and avalanches, and the roads to any other of the four Chardham Yatra sites are often blocked for weeks, especially during the rainy season. The local solution is to dynamite the mountain, then clear away the rubble. Boom! The road is wider. A temporary success, but the next mudslides are usually worse, because the mountains have been destabilized by the dynamite. And the boulders and dirt fall into the rushing waters of Ganga, choking the narrow river. And each time tourists complain about the landslides, the officials decide to blast more dynamite to make the road wider. As we drove through these mountains, I laughed at the bureaucratic and engineering absurdity, and I cried at the ramifications this has for the sacred mountains and those who live here. Finally, we reached Gangotri, and I ran down from the guest house to the rushing, icy waters of Bhagirati Ganga, a mere 11 miles from her source. Promises to my mother not to drink the water were long forgotten. Made in another time and place, I scooped it up by the handful, raising my cupped palms to eager lips. I could not get enough. Palmful after palmful I drank. It was the sweetest nectar I'd ever tasted, and so cold my teeth began to throb. The water quenched not only my tongue and throat, but every yearning I had ever known as well. Early the following morning, June 2nd, as I laced up my hiking boots, the adrenaline rush began. I had spent many blissful weekends and vacations trekking and backpacking through the mountains of California, Wyoming, Montana, and other parts of the United States. Trekking on dirt paths through winding redwood and pine forests was by far my favorite way to spend free time. Since moving to India, however, I hadn't done any hiking except for our pilgrimages to Lake Mansarovar and Mount Kailash in Tibet, and trips to Badrinath and Kedarnath. In 10 years, I'd laced these boots just a handful of times. There were two distinct yet intermingling levels of my adrenaline rush that morning. First, just to have those hiking boots on and know that in a few hours I'd be far from cars, roads, and buildings, and would be walking further and farther into the woods. My companions would be the trees. My vision would rest only on the path ahead and the wide, dense forest surrounding it. When I raised my eyes, I would catch glimpses of deep blue sky, ever still and present as the canvas for the forest and mountains. In a few hours my breath would draw more quickly, and my lips would part gently as my lungs filled with high-altitude mountain air, rich with sacred energy, but low in oxygen. In that slightly oxygen-deprived state, my mind would become deeply still. In years long before I had ever heard the words mantra or japa, I experienced their power hiking in the mountains. As I climbed the Grand Canyon as a teenager, we trekked from the river up to the canyon ridge, up hundreds of switchbacks to where our cars were, an elevation gain of almost 5,000 feet. We began in a group and seamlessly paired off into 2s and 3s based on hiking speed, but all I wanted was to be alone. I hiked more and more quickly to leave the chatty groups behind so I'd be surrounded only by the emptiness of the Grand Canyon and the heat rising from the sandstone. Soon I couldn't see anyone ahead or behind me. Oh, wow! Oh, wow! Oh, wow! I found myself saying over and over in my mind. Over the 6-hour hike, I sweated and became breathless and lightheaded, while something inside kept repeating, "Oh, wow! Oh, wow! Right, left, right, left, right, left. Oh, wow! Oh, wow! Oh, wow!" It stayed with me until I drifted off to sleep that night. By morning, I was left with the memory and a permanent impression on my 17-year-old psyche that I had merged with the Grand Canyon. Today, we would trek 8.5 miles to Bhojbhāsa, a tiny hamlet only a few miles from Gaumukh, the only place between Gangotri and the glacier where one can stay the night. There is a threadbare government tourist bungalow there, at which we'd be staying, and a simple ashram, Lal Baba Ashram, where some of our yatris, fellow pilgrims, would stay. 8.5 heavenly miles in my beloved hiking boots, no task except to breathe, no sights except the winding path, no sounds but the rush of the river far below. I so longed for the silence into which I could merge with the pulsing of the trees, the clashing of the river against her rocky banks, and the songs of the birds. The second reason for my adrenaline rush was that each delicious step, each exquisite moment of merging with the mountains themselves would bring me closer and closer to Gaumukh, closer and closer to the sacred womb of Mother Ganga. As we began the trek through the ranger station gates bordering Gangotri, the path narrowed, and I wanted to sprint ahead to fall in tears at the feet of the trees, lie in comfort of the pine needles of the Himalayan cheer pine trees, roll and fall in prayer on the earthen path as it rose above the narrow river below. But I could not. The pull of the role I play in pilgrimage, the responsibility I had internalized in a decade of living in India, held me back. Sadhvis, renunciates, spiritual leaders, do not run ecstatically on mountain paths in hiking boots and plunge themselves face down into wet, grassy root of trees. They do not sob with each step. They walk agreeably, smiling with the group. They make sure everyone has water bottles. They stop for breaks when the group stops. They lovingly answer questions asked by fellow travelers as they walk. They pause so people can take photos with them along the way. But I yearned so desperately to burst forth, throw off my clothes, not just the robes, but every stitch of clothing as well, and merge into the mountain, just as Mira had merged into Krishna. Thankfully, after a few miles, the group organically thinned out. The athletes among us moved quickly, while those with knee and back issues, the overweight and the out-of-shape lagged behind. Pujya Swamiji was surrounded in front, behind, and on each side by the smartest, strongest, and most responsible, yellow-clad Rishi Kumars who had been chosen to join the yatra. Most were from these mountains, and being able to accompany the Guru on this sacred journey was the greatest honor. A small group of devotees, young men and women from around the world who had come to be a part of this auspicious pilgrimage, walked just behind Swamiji, interspersed with the Rishi Kumars. One man carried his thermos of warm water and offered it to him every few minutes. Swamiji set a pace for the group that was easy and smooth, yet also fast, which meant he was feeling great, so he was safe. I allowed my pace to slow ever so slightly, and I dropped back from the group surrounding Swamiji. He was still in easy eyesight. To lose him entirely from view would create a level of anxiety that cut straight through my bliss. The air grew silent, my breath became quiet, and the only noise I could hear, save for Ganga's waters below, was the sound of my boots on the path. Oh wow, had been replaced by a mantra given to me. As I walked alone on the mountain path, firm and stable in my beloved hiking boots, my mantra chanted itself, mile after mile throughout my body. At Bhojbhāsa, Pujya Swamiji led an arti on the rocky edge of Bhagirati, zipped into ski jackets with wool hats pulled down over our ears. We sung and meditated as the frigid wind wrapped around us, lashing our noses and cheeks and bare hands. Our plan was to leave Bhojbhāsa just before sunrise the following morning and cover the remaining 2.5 miles to Gaumukh by 7 or 7:30 a.m. After praying and meditating at the glacier, we'd return to Bhojbhāsa for a hot breakfast, gather our bags and trek back to Gangotri. The only thing we needed for the walk to Gaumukh from Bhojbhāsa was a thermos of warm water, a bit of dried fruit or some kind of snack, and our cameras, of course. As I packed a small bag by flashlight that morning, one of my tent mates looked over. "Why are you packing clothes? We're coming back here on the way to Gangotri, aren't we?" "Yes," I replied, not in the mood for conversation but trying to be polite. "But I'm going to have a bath in Gaumukh, and so I'm packing for a change of clothes." "You are what?" she exclaimed, breaking the morning silence. "You'll catch pneumonia. You'll have to go to the hospital." "Possibly," I said, "but I doubt it. I need to take a bath there. There is no question about it. I can't not have a bath." The idea of not bathing in the womb of the mother was inconceivable. I was returning to the source, not just to take its picture, not just to pray and prostrate, but to become one with it. Nothing else mattered. My tent mate's eyes widened, and thankfully, she said nothing more. The sun began to rise, casting an orange glow on the east face of the mountain as we trekked 1.5 miles on the path, followed by more than a half mile of scrambling over boulders. Due to the fragility of the mountain, the last couple of miles before Gaumukh are a constantly moving glacial zone. There's no set path. Each fall of rocks or shift of the glacier changes the route. Some of the group stopped here, satisfied at having arrived content and blissful. They sat on the boulders and meditated on the banks of Bhagirati, while the rest of us continued ahead, with agile Rishi Kumars holding our hands as we scrambled up and over the rocks. As I climbed onto a smooth, oval-shaped boulder, sitting higher than the rest and smoothed by the wet wind and rushing water during monsoons, I fell to my knees. There she was. About 100 yards ahead, a small cylindrical opening appeared at the base of a snowy rock-covered glacier from which frothy, foaming blue and white water rushed into the world. The womb of the mother. from that opening in the nearly 20-mile-long glacier, which no longer looks like the cow's mouth, Gaumukh, for which it is named, Mother Ganga flows onto earth. As I focused my eyes on the water pouring out of the glacial source, my peripheral vision faded. The mountainsides, the ground, and the sky all vanished, and only the source existed. I felt transported back to the beginning of time, to the place, the moment, the state of creation as it flowed forth from the Creator. It was from here, and it was happening before me and through me at this moment. The water flowed over my eyes without touching them and pulled down the lids. I sat still as an unborn embryo, my heart pumping only by the invisible cord that connected me, not through my belly button, but through every pore, every cell of my as yet unformed, undifferentiated being. A beating heart, an experience of chilled wet drops being sprayed by the wind, a gentle vibration of energy. This was all I was aware of. Eventually the waters pulled my eyelids gently open, and I beheld my guru sitting on another rock a few yards away, his eyes closed, surrounded by beatific yellow-clad Rishikumars, backs perfectly straight, necks stretched to the sky, eyes closed as well. Into what historic reality had my eyes opened? What did 2007 mean? We were timeless, sitting on rocks, brushed by the breeze that carried drops of sacred birth from the mother's womb onto our faces. There had never been a time when the water had not flowed. She was eternal, the Creator. I was sitting in the lap of creation. Slowly I climbed down the rocks toward the glacial source. The umbilical cord in which I was wrapped drew me closer and closer and closer. The large boulders gave way to a pebbled pathway lining the narrow riverbed. The waters from Gaumukh are joined along with her 1,500-mile path to the ocean at Ganga. At Ganga Sagar, it's called, by innumerable tributaries ranging from local streams, small as they are, to the sacred Mandakini and Alakananda rivers. But here, at the source, she is not yet a wide river. The riverbed is about 15 to 25 feet across. The water is fast, though, being thrust out of the source by an unseen power, the force with which a mother births creation. I bent down and gently put my hands into the water just a few feet from where the mother goddess's womb opened. I yearned to touch the divine. The water was so cold, it burned. My hands felt as though I had thrust them into a yajna fire. The skin melting off them. It did not matter. I would die to be born. I would dissolve into creation. I picked up the brass lota, a traditional vessel used for bathing. I don't know where it had appeared from. I hadn't carried it with me. I planned to dip into the river myself, but unseasonably early rains and shifts in the glacial plates had made the river run even faster and deeper than usual. It was definitely not safe to jump in, yet there was no way I wasn't going to bathe in her waters and feel her with every cell of my being, inner and outer. And now the lota had appeared. I sat on pebbles at the edge of the water and filled the lota from the rushing stream. Closing my eyes, I poured the water over my body. My senses jumped awake with the shock of the temperature, blood surging to my skin, and my racing heart were instruments accompanying me in the symphony playing loudly within me. Again and again I filled the lota and emptied it over my body, dying, being born, and being blessed again and again as the goddess poured over and through me. Who I thought I was washed off me and into the river. The makeup of my identity, seared off by the glacial water, ran down my body and trickled away over the rocks into Ganga. I poured and I poured, the tears from my eyes adding salt to the waters in which I was born. Bas didi, jal bahut thanda hai. I heard a faraway voice enter my awareness. Bas, meaning please. Aap bimar ho jaogai. Enough, sister. The water is very cold. You will get sick. Enough. My eyes opened as water was poured over them by my arm, which continued to repeatedly lift to fill and empty the lota on my newly born head. Through the stream, I could make out one of the men who lived and served at the ashram, a close friend, brother, and caretaker standing over me, his hand outstretched, gently but firmly requesting that I give him the lota. Enough, my elder sister, he was saying in Hindi. The water is very cold. You will get sick. He took the lota gently from my hand and wrapped a towel over my shoulders. Thand lag jaogai. You will catch a cold. Still sitting at the river's edge, I allowed him to take the lota and closed my eyes into the strong rays of the mid-morning sun. I was home. Thank you for listening. That is the end of that chapter. And how blessed are we to be able to go on that yatra, sacred pilgrimage with her to the source of Mother Ganga, perhaps the holiest river in the world, in the glaciers of the Himalayas, where she got to bathe in the womb of the Creator. Namaste.